SEGA presents SEGA Talk, a podcast talking all things SEGA! With your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. Say what?
All right, here we go. Hello and welcome to the SEGA Talk podcast. I'm Barry. With me is George.
Hello, everybody.
And George, you will never guess what game we are covering this episode.
What game are we covering this episode, Barry?
Hang on.
Hang on to what?
Hang on.
Hang on what?
No, just hang on.
The game Hang On?
Yes.
All right,
See,
right.
That was a little vaudevillian humor. That was actually a routine performed in 1920 by Cecil and Elber.
See?
You've never heard of them, but
No, but we learn something in this show every day.
I don't know. I wanted to try something different. So if you like that intro, sound off in the comments below. If you want a vaudevillian act at the beginning of every SEGA Talk now. All right, let's get into this.
It's hard to do.
So I'm looking at my notes, and I already messed up the date. It's actually 1985, Back to the Future. Got you thinking that. All right, so Sega's Hang On came out in 1985 to arcades, July exactly. And it's one of Sega's most iconic games. It was designed by Yu Suzuki. You might have heard of him. And the game is notable for being the first full-body experience arcade game featuring a bike that players rode on and leaned left to right to steer. So this was the first full-body experience arcade game, full stop. The bike thing just happens to be what kind of full-body experience it is. Before that, you did not ride on something. You just kind of stood there and hit buttons. They maybe had little gimmicks like looking through a porthole or something like that. But that's pretty impressive. The game also featured I believe there was a sit-down version and there was a basic stand-up version. And it has seen several ports to home and portable consoles. So to kick things off, the first question, what was your earliest experience with Hang On, and have you ridden the deluxe cabinet?
I've actually seen the deluxe cabinet in person, but I've never rode it. I was like a kid when I saw it, and I was scared because like it leans, right? So I was scared of like kind of, when you're a kid, you're like, I really don't want to make get on this bike and then fall down in front of like public people. So I just admire it from like a distance. Plus, you don't have money as a kid either, so it's another hassle to get through, right? Your parents are like, I already bought you video games at your house. Why do you want me to give you money to play an old game at this point, right? Like in the mid-90s or like the early 90s. So to me, it was I played it. I think I played. The only one I played is the stand-up version that you talked about, not the deluxe version. And I'm sure you played the deluxe version since you have a lot of arcades where you live right now. But
but
you tell me about your arcade deluxe experience.
I'm gonna make you feel like a fool. I actually have never ridden the deluxe version of Hang On. I believe it's the only deluxe AM2 game that I have not played. And I mean, they don't have it out here at the Galloping Ghost. The closest chance I had was it was in that traveling video games exhibit that I believe was in Philadelphia, but I had already moved from Philly, and when I was visiting, it was already gone. But they had the deluxe version. I'll be honest, the first time I saw the deluxe was in Shenmue. And
it looks nice in that game too.
It looks beautiful, and I thought, this is probably like a Japanese exclusive, like it never left Japan, but it definitely was around. It's just that this game is old. Like, I mean, 1985 is probably the oldest game we've covered on this show, and it's starting to creep into games that predate us. Like, I think a lot of times we talk about games like 1990, and we're a couple of old farts. So we're like talking about it. Like, I remember the Master System, of course. It had brilliant graphics. But with this one, it's like we were baby Sonics. We were little baby Sonics at this point.
Actually, I wasn't even born when this came out. I was 86,
Yeah,
so
you were
yeah.
86. I was 84, late 84. So I have no excuse. I should have played this.
Two
I
years old
did.
just writing it.
I mean, I most definitely played the stand-up cabinet, and we're not going to cover it too much on here, but Super Hang-On is really the game I think a lot of people experienced and probably think they played the original, but they haven't.
Yeah.
So, and we'll definitely get into that, but let's get into the development because I think you'll be surprised by some of the stuff we're going to cover. So you hear the name Yu Suzuki, you would expect Hang On to be an AM2 game, but this is not the case. In fact, Hang On was developed by Studio 128 and built on the SEGA Hang On hardware that later powered Space Harrier, which was the 11th SEGA talk that we did.
Yes.
Studio
yeah, that's true.
128. That seems forever ago too.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I'll just take a break here. We covered, I think, all the main Superscalar Yu Suzuki games now that I can think of. Maybe we didn't do Afterburner yet. I'll have to double check. But it's interesting now that we're going back to the original so late in this series. You know, like we're at episode 36 now. But it's interesting because you look back and the Studio 128, it was 5 minutes from Sega's main offices, so it was a little bit removed, which I guess was nice for them. It featured a staff of 5 to 10 people, and it was here that the popular Taikan games, or bodily sensation or experience games, were made throughout the 80s. And I've just been watching the Disney Plus show, The Imagineering Story, where they talk about the Disney engineers who work on the parks. And there's a real strong resemblance to what I was reading about Studio 128 and Disney Imagineering, in that a lot of the stuff they did was working in secret. They didn't want their technology and future plans to leak. So a lot of the history, at least for Sega, has never come out because they were not keeping records of a lot of things. They weren't talking about a lot of things. And, you know, at least with Disney, you know, years later people talk and they do documentaries, but it's just fascinating that so much of these 80s arcade games, we don't know too much about them. I couldn't even figure out like who wrote what music, who did what. Yu Suzuki's the only name that came up on Hang On, despite I'm sure more people working on it.
Of course.
In fact, even Sega president Hayao Nakayama was once blocked from entering Studio 128. So, you know, when your president is having trouble getting in, you know you're in trouble.
Sounds like a club, you know?
It does, yeah. I kind of want to make a nightclub called Studio 128. That'd be pretty sweet.
Wasn't there like a studio in New York called like back in the 70s or 60s called like Studio something like 48
50,
or something?
54, right?
54, yeah. There you go.
Yeah. That would be sweet. We should do that. I don't know why we're doing this.
It's like a video game bar, right? Like
well,
a
yeah,
nightclub video game bar?
That
with
would
all
be
men?
Oh my god, it would be men only.
Men only, only gamers, obviously.
Shirts optional.
Obviously.
You can fight in the corner, and we have all the deluxe Superscalar cabinets that you can ride.
We have to have We have to have GameCube and Smash just because, you know, that draws the crowd, right?
Yeah, bring the kids in. So because of Sega's secrecy and lack of any real order with who worked on what games, Studio 128 is not directly credited with any games. However, it did eventually become Sega R&D 8, which in turn became Sega AM2. And here's a bit of trivia I thought was really cool. I never knew this. The only in-game reference to the studio is hidden in Afterburner. Can you guess what that is? You probably are looking at the notes.
I am looking at the notes, but like, I just tell us because I already saw the notes. I just don't want to say it.
So it's the aircraft carrier number. It says 128 as you take off. So that's pretty sweet.
Nobody would have figured that out, really.
No. Well, I mean, yeah.
Hardcore fans.
What do you think about this secret studio, and what are your thoughts on Studio 128? I haven't heard about it until writing these notes. I'm so shocked.
I knew that AM2 like was an AM2 for a while, and I know this is something that we've talked about and like debated with people in Sega Retro that do these updates for these sites. But they're right. I mean, if it wasn't called that, I mean, Yu Suzuki AM2 became what it was because what it seems like is like other teams coming all together, right?
Right.
So I didn't know about Studio. It was called Studio 128. So this is something new that I didn't know. But it kind of reminds me of like how we all assume that Streets of Rage 2 was just made by Sega, but like really it was made by Ancient, which is a third party that Sega contracted and uses. I mean, what's his name? Yuzo Koshiro's sister owns that studio. So and it's still around, by the way, and they still make games.
Right.
So, yeah,
right.
it's weird. This one obviously got, put into Sega, like absorbed.
Right. It kind of reminds me of, oh man, I just forgot what it reminds. Oh, with Studio Ghibli, how they'll say, here's the Studio Ghibli filmography, and they'll show like The Valley of the Wind and even
Kaska.
Yeah. And
like the 80s films.
Grave of the Fireflies, like these movies that came out before they were really actually Studio Ghibli, but all the people were there. So you could say in going backwards, it is an AM2 game, and it is an AM2 franchise because they did make additional games later on under the AM2 name.
And they celebrated in their other games too. A lot.
Exactly. Yeah. What I thought was really cool, and I mentioned it earlier, is that Hang-On had its own arcade system. And this is another thing. You might say, if you want to lose at trivia, it's not an AM2 game and it's not a System 16 game. In fact, the system has no name. It has only been known as the Sega Hang-On arcade hardware. And that probably goes along with the secrecy at Studio 128. The system saw an upgrade with the release of Space Harrier. And if you want to read more about the specs, they are on Sega Retro if you just look up Hang-On hardware. But essentially the specs on the upgraded one were similar to the System 16. However, there is a stronger focus on the graphics. And the board was actually designed to scale a large number of sprites and textures in real time. At the time, the hardware was groundbreaking, and it kicked off a series of super scalar arcade systems within Sega. And I'd say Nintendo probably picked up and ran with it, right? Because people were like, oh, the SNES has super scalar and Genesis doesn't.
Yeah, but like, I don't know, the idea of like a scalar, I mean, I understand that Sega, these studios right here perfected it because, the game I'm going to mention next is like not good at all and it's not even complete, but Turbo in 82 or whatever kind of thought the same idea, but it's not a good game at all and it wasn't a hit at all.
Yeah.
But like, this popularized it for sure because like right after this, years after this, when the Super Nintendo came out, this is something that you saw a lot, like a focus that Nintendo put into the hardware, right?
Right.
They made a chip special to make do like scalar graphics, kind of, and it looks really cool on the Super Nintendo. Really, so.
And how funny is it that probably the best super scalar Nintendo game is F-Zero, and then Sega went and probably made the best F-Zero game.
I was actually telling that to somebody. Like, I remember playing that game on Super Nintendo and being blown away. And then the idea that like Sega came and they're like, actually, we're gonna make the best one now, and it's like, that's sick. I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. So this, I do have another little trivia question that you could answer, and I didn't put the answers on here.
Uh-oh.
So 5 games were developed on the Hang-On hardware. Can you name these 5 games? I've already named 2 of them.
Outrun, right?
No, I said so. Hang-On, obviously, and Space Harrier. What are the other 3?
I literally thought Outrun was one of them. To be honest, nope. I thought these all reused the same arcade board. That's why they look so alike. But I guess that one's wrong. Afterburner?
No.
Wait, no?
No.
I'm trying to think of other games that came out during that time period. Like, are they playing games, right? So it's like G-Lock and stuff like those were 3D, weren't they?
No.
G-Lock.
No. Do you want to give me?
I'm not going to guess. Yeah.
All right. I'll give you the answers. It's Enduro Racer, Super Hang-On, and Limited Edition Hang-On.
Oh, come on. Some of those are like, they're like, come on. Like,
I'm sorry,
Super
George.
Hang-On? Yeah, I guess you're right. I just didn't think of saying the same game, but like the different versions.
Yeah.
So Special Edition Hang-On?
Yeah, we'll get into that too. There's some Hang-Ons here that I've never heard of, version, but you're just going to have to hang on. Okay?
Oh, I can do that.
So this is the part where we talk about gameplay, and you're going to be shocked by how short this is. So Similar to Outrun, Hang On sees players attempting to hit a checkpoint before the time runs out, while avoiding other racers and obstacles. Instead of Outrun's branching path, however, Hang On was a simple linear race to the finish. I don't remember how many stages, but some playthroughs I watched were up to 5. And
Yeah, it was really short.
yeah. You accelerated, decelerated, and leaned left and right to steer. That's it.
Yeah.
So being the first of Suzuki's superscalers, Hang On is very simple. Do you think this simplicity helps or hurts the game's longevity? Do you think it falls victim to Sega's sequel curse, where the second game outdoes the original to the point where the first game is deemed not as good? And I'm referring to like Super Hang On, Outrun. Can you go back and still play the original Hang On and enjoy it?
So when I played the when I got MAME and stuff like for the first time, and I was like, oh, you could do games on computer, and I started playing a bunch of arcade games. I just played the first one forever, and I was like, wait, there's a super version? And I just thought it was like a console version, like a Super Nintendo. You know, when they made all those like Sega games on Super Nintendo, and you're like, what is this, right? Or like they called them like Super Fantasy Zone, and it's a Mega Drive game. That's what I thought it was, so I didn't even really touch it for a while. And then when I did play it, it was like, wow, okay, this is like an expansion pack that just basically fixes everything. So I think, I mean, if you had to play one, you would go to Super, right? There's no reason to like play the old one. But if you like Super Hang On and want to go back and play, I guess, a different version of it. But that's the problem with these games, right? Back then, they kind of felt like Super Hang On was a definitive version, and the old one was just them just getting their feet wet to see if anybody even cared about the game.
Right. I would say that Hang On and Super Hang On are much more different than Galaxy Force 2, and Afterburner 2. Like, in the cases of those two, they're not actually sequels; they're revisions. And I guess they put the 2 on there just to drive more people to try it, instead of just releasing it quietly as an update. So there is that.
I was going to say about the simplicity about it. I feel like it actually helps the game because I think when we think of arcade games here in America now, that we're like, especially like the new generation that didn't really grow up during arcades, or like in the 90s, I feel like there was a big mainstream like appeal again to these arcade games. But like in the 80s, I felt like in 70s, it was really, really mainstream. Like Space Invaders, Pac-Man. These were all super simple games and but hard to master. And I think that's something that this game kind of lends to. Like you're drunk at a bar, right? And there's a bike right there. Now your friends want to sit there, and it has to be simple for them to get, or they'll not put more quarters into it, right?
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the deluxe cabinet again, because I don't get into it later with any of the notes, but I did want to mention, this was built for the Japanese, who are smaller, lighter.
Yep.
And these games are old now. They're 35 years old, and you're not going to be seeing many of these unless people, really put a lot of work,
take care of them.
And money to take care of them. So I think one of the big things that hurts the game's longevity is actually the hardware itself. You're not going to see these too often. You're going to see the stand-up ones, and I think those are kind of, you're like playing half a game. It's not,
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%.
I've played, which one was like Thunderblade. That's a game where, and some rival fan sites hate that game. And I know full well they've never played the deluxe cabinet, because if you play Thunderblade on the deluxe cabinet, it's an amazing, super enjoyable, cool game. The problem is, though, the one that I've played, it was super rickety because so many, big Americans are crawling onto it, just like, doing all this janky stuff, where I'm absolutely certain that smaller Japanese players who are a little more respectful with the machinery, they probably are having a better time with these games. Like, I don't mean to hate on the Americans, but it's just the case.
That's not, we're heavy boys, dude. We live Americans live a very high class lifestyle where we have the abundance of calories to get big. It's a freedoms, right?
Well, yeah.
So my thing is, what's the weight limit on this? Like capacity, like what do they recommend? Like I've seen office chairs when I'm buying them and they're like 175 pounds. I'm like, dude, this is not working in America. I'm sorry for you, dude. Like this can't be in an office building, right?
Well, and,
so I don't know. I think 250 would be a decent or, max capacity. You know what I mean?
So I like that we're getting into this. So the average weight of a Japanese man is 137 pounds. The average weight of an American man is 195 pounds.
Take that, Japan. Take that.
So,
Good
it's
luck.
not like I'm trying to shame anyone here. It's just a fact that when you have a machine that's over 30 years old and it's going through all of these people playing it, it's going to break down a lot faster when more weight is on it, especially with these machines that are going left to right. And I think
don't be ashamed.
And I think that's why we don't see.
Don't be
them,
ashamed. Don't be ashamed of making fun of the skinny Japanese people, dude. We massive Americans, we need bigger bikes, dude.
I will say though,
put a Harley on
this
it.
This is a moment where I can bring up some recent news. M2 are actually releasing classic Sega arcade games again to arcades.
Oh,
so
that's right.
Who knows? There might be we might see a limited release down the line of Hang On. They might do Hang On Legacy Edition and release a limited amount to arcades for people who want to have this experience again. That would be cool. I think they should do that. Just make the bike maybe a little beefier or something.
It's definitely a little beefier, dude.
Yeah.
Like, especially now where Americans have just gotten progressively more rich and bigger.
Yeah. Let's get into the music. So the game soundtrack is short but iconic. Tracks include Title, Hang On, Gold Music, and Name Entry. So of all of these amazing songs, which is your favorite tune, and why do you think Hang On's short soundtrack has endured for all these years?
They have catchy tracks, but Outrun a Crisis is that's the best track they have, and that's a Super Hang On, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, I can't believe it's on the first one.
Hang On has good. The ding 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 ding. But
the titles, and these games, like all the Scalar games, have pretty cool indie music. When you put the Outrun has a great one. That's the one we use in the end of our videos. Mm-hmm. Obviously the title screen. When you're putting your initials is always good. Mm-hmm. It's just little things like that, and it's funny because how short it is, right?
Yeah.
How many tracks you said again? 4?
Yeah.
That's almost like this guy did it in a weekend, right?
They could do it, and I think they should do this. This would be cool. They should do a data discs release, but on a 45. Those little ones, because honestly, you could fit the entire Hang On soundtrack on a double-sided 45.
Oh yeah,
little jukebox, little jukebox record. And they could do the little.
You could listen.
Yeah.
You can listen to it while you take a dump, like one dump, and then you finish the whole soundtrack.
That should be your goal, kind of like with brushing your teeth for 2 minutes. But you have.
I'll make a video. I'll make a video on YouTube. It's just me filming myself, doing this is a good song right here. All right, I'm done. I flush in the end, and I just get up.
Yeah, save time on the toilet. Use the Hang On soundtrack as your time limit.
Of course.
I would say the main racing tune is my favorite, though the Attract sound is always good. The ding, 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 that sort of thing. You always hear it in Shenmue when you're walking through the arcades. It always catches my ear, and I sit down to play. And speaking of that, too, we don't get into it, but both Shenmue and the 3D Classics release of Super Hang On, they do a good job kind of emulating the riding cabinet. Even though you're not actually riding anything, at least you can see a 3D model. You can get the in-arcade experience with the tilting. I thought that was really cool, and it was a nice way to preserve it. In fact, M2 even went out and recorded the original machinery to get the sounds right. So I really appreciate that. That's cool. Hang On featured real advertisements, and we know about these from other Sega games. So in this game, there was Bridgestone, Shell, Gorelli Motorcycles, Tag, John Player Special Cigarettes, Forum cigarettes, and for some reason I saw that they were called Marlboro cigarettes, but it's Marlboro. I don't know why it's just Marlboro.
Yeah. I, I have no idea.
The ads were
and like I'm just saying, like, the cigarette ads, like 3 different cigarettes. Come on, Sega. Like, I understand the kids got to smoke too, but this is getting a little ridiculous.
Oh yeah, and the ads were removed even from later releases, and Sega were criticized for the cigarette ads being in the game, targeting children. If you look, and it's our cover photo for this episode, the Hang-On bike, it's a Marlboro bike. And I'm starting to wonder, like, if you've ever worked in a corporate company, the color, like, it's not just red, it's a very specific red. So if you were to be at Marlboro and find what the Marlboro red is, like the paint chip color, and compare it to the Hang-On bike, I have to wonder if Marlboro dictated the red. You know what I mean? Like
the bike?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting, but like, I mean, I would be okay with that. Like, just the color, it's whatever. Right. But like the idea that they're putting, like, this is kind of ridiculous. Even in the 80s,
yeah.
Like, didn't they already know in the late 70s that cigarettes are no bueno for you? Mm-hmm. So like, the idea that Sega's like, oh, cool, money. I don't know. Did they get paid for this, or did they just want to be like, oh, we want to put ads so it could look more realistic?
No, they definitely got money. I'm certain. Like, you know, with all the R&D stuff, I'm sure they were just going like, who wants to sponsor us? Throw us some cash for our development. We'll put your ads in there. But I just think it's interesting that, you know, they probably decided who was going to be the bike sponsor, and it was probably the highest paying sponsor there. And then from there, they probably said, well, if Marlboro is the red bike, let's make the bike red. And, you know, it's like, that's weird.
This wouldn't fly today. That wouldn't fly today because of the ESRB and all that. Yeah. But, like, it's funny because this is, like, the Wild West. And it's, like, I don't know, somehow, like, you know how we went to court because of, like, Mortal Kombat and all that? Mm-hmm. I feel like this is worse. Like, for some reason, like, putting ads for, like, cigarettes is giving me, like, little, like, this is not good, dude.
Yeah, for sure. And my mind's kind of blown right now because I think we're probably the first people to realize that the Hang-On bike is red because it's a Marlboro cigarette bike. That's crazy.
Sweet.
Well,
cancer.
first at Sega Bits, I'm going to post this on the front page right now. So
good.
I think we've just discussed that Sega probably did go too far with the ads in this game. I was curious what your thoughts were on real world products being promoted in Sega arcade games in general. And I'll give some examples. Crazy Taxi, you take people to real destinations like Tower Records, KFC. Super Monkey Ball had banana stickers from, I believe it was Dole on their
yeah, and I think later it was like, what's the other one called with the lady with the fruit basket?
Chiquita Banana.
Yeah, Chiquita, because I remember Sega was like, when they did Step and Roll, they like messaged me and they're like, you want shirts? And they sent me like 1,000 shirts of Chiquita. And I was like, I didn't know what to do with them, so I just gave them away to people and gave them to the people on the sites.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was sponsored by that, so it's nothing new. Personally, cigarettes a little overboard, but I think, okay, so if you're gonna be releasing the game in the future, this causes a problem, right? Getting all these licenses together, is it worth getting the payment? And then now we're really talking about, would fans even care if we re-release Crazy Taxi but change the destinations to like something else? Like, how about if Sega makes a new contract with McDonald's, or, you know, I can't even think of another company like that sells CDs, right? FYI or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
So like new stores that are still in business, like obviously Tower Records is not a thing anymore, is it?
No, I don't believe so. I could be wrong, but I haven't seen one.
Yeah, neither have I. Yeah. So to me, it's like, it really does date the game. Like the idea that the old game had like 3 cigarette companies, which I've never even heard of. John Player Special Cigarettes. Have you ever heard of those cigarettes?
No, I want to smoke them now for some reason, though. I don't know why.
Yeah. I got to go on eBay and get like a vintage 80s pack.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll do a cigarette review of the Hang-On cigarettes. But what's your opinion on like having these sort of like ads in games?
I think It's, I mean, on one hand, it's smart when you're doing Outrun or Afterburner and you're getting real vehicles, but then you're biting yourself in the ass later on with re-releases because then you might lose the license as they have, and then you either change the vehicle and people bitch and moan, even though I don't care what the car looks like in Outrun, really, or they pull it. They pull it from digital services like Afterburner Climax. So that does annoy me. I think with Crazy Taxi, I actually really like the product placement because it's funny. Because you have the lines, "Take me to KFC," like it's
that's actually my favorite part. That's actually one of the games where I was like, yeah, this is pretty funny, like the way they did it.
yeah.
I thought it was like them trying to be funny,
Hmm.
but I mean, now when I'm growing up, it's more like, oh, they got paid to put these people, these ads in.
Right. And I think it's actually kind of smart in terms of gameplay with Crazy Taxi because when they come to you and say, "Take me to KFC," the game is hectic as is. So you're just looking for KFC and you know what KFC looks like. When you see that restaurant from a mile away, you see it. But if they were to make up fake
Yeah.
ones and say, "Take me to Jimmy's Chicken Shack," and you're like, "All right, let me look for it." And you're like, "It's that building with the green?" No, wait, I have to read like the logo. I don't know what the logo looks like. It's like Tower Records is
Yeah.
very eye-catching. It's this big yellow thing. You know what you're looking for with Tower Records. So I think in that case it really works. I think these like billboards though and stuff that have no impact on the gameplay, get rid of them, change them. I don't care. Like I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Make fake ads up.
Yeah, and shame on you, Sega, for cigarettes. I think I'm gonna quit doing this. No, that's okay. But let's get into the gameplay. Let's get back into that a little bit. So the Hang On, the name Hang On, it actually is a word coming from the bikers literally having to hang on to the bike while making sharp turns. And Suzuki said he read about this in a Japanese bike magazine. However, in North America, the term is called hang off. But despite this, Suzuki chose the Hang On name for all of the regions. Have you heard about this term? Probably not. And which name do you prefer, Hang On or Hang Off?
Well, I obviously prefer Hang On because, like, when you see the deluxe cabinet, it literally looks like you're hanging on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you go to the side, I mean, it's not that steep, but when I was a kid and that, you see it move, you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't look safe. So, yeah, I think Hang On is fine as a name, even though it's not a correct term. And I think Hang Off, like, imagine it was called Hang Off.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know any terms, but Hang On just makes sense. Like, you're hanging on to a deluxe, like an actual bike. So,
Right. Hang
to
off
me, it just makes sense.
is kind of like you're coming off of the bike.
Mhm.
So I can see that, especially when you look at the like the flyer artwork, and the guys are really coming off the side there. Like they're kind of halfway off the bike. So, I mean, that makes sense. But I think just in terms of an action word, on just works a lot more. Off seems kind of negative. Like, do you really want?
That's it right there.
Do you really want a machine that you power on, that you plug into a wall with the word off on it?
Everything on just seems like, oh, you're ready to go on. Like, you know what I mean? Like turning something, like you said, turning something off. Turning off is always like a negative. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, it doesn't sound good. Yeah.
So
I agree with you
it's smart. Also, that little hyphen too. I think a lot of people forget the hyphen. Hang hyphen on. Kind of like with.
And it's another thing with Outrun.
Yep. Which is one word.
Do you space it? Do you not space it? Sometimes Sega spaces it. Sometimes they don't space it. Like, I've noticed that. It's like, what is this? Okay, I don't know.
Get it right.
But yeah.
Come on, guys.
Yeah, get it right.
In an interview, and this is the little thing I found, with G4, Suzuki said, "I rode on motorcycles a lot. When we came up with the prototype for the arcades, I would ride on that prototype bike for hours and hours every day." So this is.
Do you believe that?
I believe that, because Suzuki.
Yeah, I do.
He gets a lot of his ideas from real world experiences. Sometimes in the past on the show, we'll joke like he's just messing around and wasting Sega's money. Not really, but you know.
He's just drinking whiskey in his office.
Right.
Yeah.
So with this in mind, can you think of other experiences that influenced Suzuki's later games? Because, this is a trend with him.
I mean, Shimyu with his travels to
Mm-hmm.
China, Outrun driving his sports car around Europe
Mm-hmm.
or America or whatever it was.
Right.
I'm trying to think of other ones, but like I'm pretty sure Virtual Fighter was another thing that was like Chinese influenced, at least some of the ideas. I mean, I guess we could just say that Virtual Fighter was made as a response to Street Fighter 2, but I think there's some real world experiences where he made the game different compared to everybody else. Like when you see Tekken and like all these other games, they always have these like weird like storylines with like spiritual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like Virtual Fighter is pretty much like more like, I guess it has a crazy story behind it, but it feels more like an AM2 game, right? Where it's just like avatars that you play as, right?
Right, right. And we've discussed this before, where the AM2 games, the style, it's clean, it's pure, but it still has a little bit of a stylistic edge to it. So it's not like the equivalent of playing golf on Master System, where it's just like it's golf, it's get what you want, get what you came for kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like with Hang On, it's a unique name, unique art style kind of there. The music is catchy, so they put a little pizzazz on it. It's not basic flat bike, bikes. So there's that, and Suzuki, I kind of want him to do more. Like I want him to go experience more to see what he could make games off of. I hope his next game isn't just like taking it's a video game where you're trying to get a Kickstarter project going and you keep visiting
Oh my god.
you keep visiting like weird conventions in like, I don't know, coastal cities in Spain,
Oh yes, that'd be great. And you have to pitch your game to Sega and stuff. That'd be
That
great.
would be awesome. I think I would love to see a Sega Gaga about its Yu Suzuki and his experiences.
Yeah, you play as him as the main character.
Yeah.
That'd be great. I love
And then he like you're trying to control him and he walks away and he starts like reading a book about wrestling and you're like, no, come on, go back. And he's like, there's some ideas here. I think I could make a game about wrestling.
I like the idea that like, you know how in other games they kind of make you go to the main objective after a while. In this game, he forces you to like go to bars and do other things. He's like, not right now. we'll finish the game later.
It's like half control Suzuki, half AI, where he just goes off and does his own thing.
That'd be great.
Anyway,
back on topic.
Yeah, back on topic. So the same year that the game hit arcades, Hang On released to the Sega Mark III in Japan and later to the Master System in America and Europe. Oddly, North American Hang On never saw a standalone release. Instead, it was bundled with either Safari Hunt or Astro Warrior or built into the console itself. Have you played the Master System game? If so, do you own it? And do you remember which bundle it was?
I played it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that great. I don't know what version I played though, because I have to look at my Master System. I haven't picked out my Master System in a long time. Like, I've been looking into buying like a FrameMeister or something just to plug it into the LCD, like to plug all these games into my like LCD screen or whatever, or my big screen. But yeah, I haven't taken it out in a while. I don't remember if I have the cartridge or if I have it built in. I don't know if there's any differences, but like, I don't know. To me, it's like, it's hard for me to play the arcade version and then go back and play a Master System version. Like, especially since you could tell the arcade version's like 100 times better.
Yeah.
So what was your opinion on the Master System version and which version do you play?
So I have the one bundled with Safari Hunt, and it is disappointing, and I think my criticisms of it will actually come up in this next section here. So the Mark III Sega Master System version, well, it did have an improvement over the arcade original. It gave you the ability to switch gears by pressing up and down. There was a major downside, and
dude, I remember playing it and forgetting about that. By the way, because they don't tell you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just didn't know.
Well, you forget about that, and then also there's no music.
Yeah,
it's just
true.
silent.
It was just like, and then like the weird effects for the bike.
And I think, and I think we can agree this hurts the game, right? Like it removes a pretty important aspect. Imagine playing Outrun, Space Harrier, Afterburner, any of those games on mute or with just the sound effects. Like that's when it starts becoming, that's when Hang On became Bike Racer, you know, like it removed one of the big things that made it unique and stand out from the other games that were just trying to be a basic blah, you know, like golf.
It's like
Racing.
watching a movie and you're like, cool, no music in this movie.
Right.
That's cool, I guess, right?
Music goes a long way to make a ordinary game extraordinary. You can quote me on that.
Yeah, that's for sure. I agree with that.
So this is weird. I thought this was really weird in my note gathering. So the SG-1000, which we both know predates the Mark III, it also saw a port, but the game was called Hang On 2. And this was, and Sega's weird with sequels in the 80s and early 90s. So this was actually a sequel to the Mark III Master System release, but due to being in older hardware, the graphics suffered. But on the plus side, they managed to work the arcade music in, and they released a bike handle accessory, which only worked with this game on the SG-1000, but is said to also work on the Master System and Mega Drive consoles with select racing games. So I'm trying to think of some other, like we had a Space Harrier 2 on the Genesis Mega Drive.
That's true.
And the Space Harrier 3D is technically the third game or a semi-sequel to the original because it's a different game, even though it's using 3D glasses. So in this case, what are your thoughts on a Hang On sequel releasing exclusively to the very first Sega console and actually having more features than the Master System port?
It's weird that they released it on the Mark III, and then they're like, oh, let's go back and make the sequel on the SG-1000. They got limited release.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense, and then they released some hardware for it, so maybe they were working on this before, and they just decided, let's call it 2, and maybe we'll sell some units, because, like, didn't the SG-1000 largely just release in Japan and, like, maybe select markets here?
Yeah, and I think the two things that probably happened were, one, they wanted to release it to the SG-1000 because that was a more, kind of the more prevalent console at the time, and the Master System was newer, so they probably rushed that release. I also think that the Hang On 2, it's not so much a revision or a sequel as it is just a different name so that the two can stand apart, so you know it's a different game. But putting 2 on there makes it a sequel, but it's a sequel.
Yeah,
it's
it
a sequel to a port on a previous generation console, which I don't think has ever happened, ever. I don't think.
Yeah, like it's like if Uncharted 5 came out on the PS3.
Right.
They're like, oh, cool, PS5 came out, but that's cool. You're going to make it on the PS3.
Yeah, the only thing I can maybe think of is Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse was on the Mega Drive, but then there were ports to the Game Gear and Master System, which then kind of saw their own sequels. So there's kind of, there's something there, but it's bizarre. And I mean, I do want to get that peripheral, though. That sounds pretty sweet. So
good luck. It probably costs a lot.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up after we do this show and not buy it. So Hang On, most famously, I think for many people a little younger than us and maybe even our age, it was playable in Shenmue and Shenmue 2. And while Hang On never had a Sega Ages port to the Saturn, within Shenmue, you can purchase Sega Ages Hang On for Rio's Saturn. And it's been speculated that this either could be a nod to a canceled port that never happened, or it was Suzuki and team kind of rectifying what they saw as a mistake in not porting the game to the Saturn. The Shenmue version of the game saw the ads replaced, and this version was also used in Yu Suzuki GameWorks Volume 1, which was a Dreamcast game disc that came inside a book. And it's very expensive now, but you can find the, it's not an ISO, but whatever it is, like Burn the Disc. I have that. It's one of the few Burn Dreamcast games I have, because it's just a much easier way to get in and play those games. The other ones included on it are Afterburner Power Drift and Space Harrier, oddly omitting Outrun. I don't know why it's not there. But still, it's pretty cool. So Shenmue introduced a generation of gamers to Hang On, and for many, this is their first time playing the game. Did you play Hang On often in Shenmue, and how do you think this helped the game's legacy?
Well, first I played it like the first time I played the game, I only played it a few times, and I remember enjoying it. But then I would always go to the story. I mean, when you play that game, when it came out, I was more interested in the 3D tech that they were pushing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like following people, doing the little things, looking at like how deep this AI goes, And at the time, it was way deeper than like Final Fantasy games, you know what I mean? Those kind of RPGs. So
Right.
that was impressive. But yeah, I mean, now when I go back, I've noticed that I play a lot more arcades.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that's always missing in the new Shinmu games. Like the third one,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have the official arcades. I think that's pretty big, and I do agree. I do know some people that were like, oh yeah, I played that on the Shinmu game in the arcades.
Mm-hmm.
So it did open up to some new gamers, and if you go online, you notice the Sega fan base is like fractured. There's like, oh, I only like Shinmu. That's it.
Yeah.
So those people know what Hang On is because of this game.
Right.
And how much did you play of it in Shinmu?
I played it quite a bit. It was really cool to have these games accessible that way. It was fun playing a game within a game. And I never got very far with it. It's a pretty difficult. It's not a super difficult game, but it's a quarter muncher. So
It is.
it was fun. I liked it. I probably played Space Harrier a lot more, but what I really liked is that it had an online leaderboard, so you could actually compete with other people and upload your scores, which was, I think, pretty groundbreaking at the time, just for the Dreamcast. And for this game, it was really the first time there were global leaderboards for Hang On. Thought that was cool.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I played it a fair amount, and it really with Shenmue, it had Yu Suzuki's name on it, and then you see these other games, and in a lot of the magazine articles and reviews, they'll say Yu Suzuki's earlier games are in this. So it really put kind of a package around or encapsulated what Yu Suzuki was. So even if Shenmue was the first time you've experienced one of his games, you could still get a taste of what this guy's history was. And to play Hang On, but then to also have the scene with Rio on the motorcycle, you start to see kind of echoes or repeated concepts in Suzuki's gameography. So it was a cool little connection there. I like that.
Yeah.
And there is a cameo outside of that in Shenmue. I'm going to go through some of the cameos here, though. There were several Hang On cameos in other Sega games because it was such a important game and an old game. So, it had a lot of time to pop up in other titles. So the bike was a hidden character in Power Drift. Did you know that?
No, I didn't
Not
know
goofy.
that.
Sonic Rider's
That's
gear,
goofy.
which would unlock the theme song. I don't know what it looked like. Maybe it was, if I'm remembering right, Sonic Riders, they had the hoverboards, and the hoverboards changed. So maybe there was a Hang On hoverboard.
That game had a lot of like Sega like Easter eggs. Even that's Ooh La La. And
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
so.
I mean, not to go on a tangent, but it was kind of like the original All Stars game. It had, like you said, Ooh La La, Knights, Super Monkey Ball. So it wasn't all Sonic Team. It was kind of a mix of like Hitmaker, UGA, Sonic Team,
Oh yeah.
AM2. There were some real cool callbacks there. So if you can get that game and get into the gameplay, which I honestly can't, like Sonic Riders, I just can't crack that. I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But if you can, there's some real cool Easter eggs in there. You can actually hear the theme song to Hang On if you put the initials HO in Daytona USA's high score screen. Ho.
Ho.
There was the Shenmue capsule toy of the racer. And is the Hang On racer a woman? Isn't that a reveal in Super Hang On?
Really? I didn't know.
I
It's like
thought there was
it's like Samus, right? Like in
yeah, I thought there was
yeah,
a super hang-on ending where the helmet comes off and it's a woman. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that was the case. Um, All-Star Racing Transforms Final Track Race of Ages features the arcade machine as a giant hologram. So we went through these. Did I forget any? And what are your favorites from this list?
well, the arcade is also in Yakuza Zero. I
Mm,
think. I think it might be in another game. But that's Super Hang
hmm.
On. It's not the original Hang On. It's the white
Yep.
one. Um, but that always like that reminded me of like, oh, it's cool that this team paid tribute to kind of like Shimyu, and having that arcade, and then the way he sits on it is pretty interesting. Like it's pretty funny. Out of these,
Hmm.
whew, um, I probably, I mean, the only one I really remember is putting HO in the Daytona USA screen because I remember being like addicted to the game.
Hmm.
Daytona USA is a really, really, really good
Yeah.
game, and so that's the only one I actually remember looking up and then doing it just to be like, okay, yeah, that's cool. What's yours?
I would say my favorite one from the list is the I really like the little capsule toy. I just think it's cute, and I want to get a 3D printer just so I can make one. um,
Don't they have them like capsule toys from Japan?
they
Like
do.
they make everything
They
in
do have like
capsule
a
toys.
keychain or something. I've seen it before. I don't know what line it's from, and yeah, I really want that. I think that's really adorable. And then probably the Race of Ages track, just in general, has so many cool call outs, and I just think, like with the Space Harrier machine, it's just such a cool design, and we'll get into some of the merchandise here, but I think it's cool to see that in 3D as a giant hologram. So should I get into the merch here?
Yeah, we should
All
get
right,
into the
let's do it.
merch.
So there's not too much we're going to mention here. There was that little toy George mentioned. I don't recall if there was like a board game. I don't think so, but some other Sega arcade games have had board games. But in recent years, there was a little scale model, and if you're watching the video, it's like this big. It's like the size of a big hamburger. And
Mm.
did you pick that up?
No, I didn't pick that one up. I picked the Virtual Fighter ones that they did where they were like
Mm,
polygon. But like sometimes when you collect Sega stuff, like some stuff like you have to be like, all right, I can't get this, but I'm gonna get
right.
this record.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
you have to pick what your poison is. And I've been trying to like scale back on toys because like they take a lot of
Hmm.
room. So I'm like, okay, I'll pick the games up, I'll pick some accessories up, I'll pick vinyls because I also collect music for other artists that are in like video games. So that's what I pick. I thought I kickstarted the pop up
Hmm.
book because there was a Kickstarter for it, and I didn't.
Oh,
I noticed in the end. So whenever I get money, I'm probably gonna order it if it's like just. I think it's just for order on their website after the
yeah, yeah,
Kickstarter,
it's
right?
up there. But yeah, you're right. So there was
Yeah.
the scale model, like I mentioned, which is actually to scale with those polygon Virtua Fighter characters, and I think there's been some Yakuza ones too. I forgot what the line is, but the
And there was also like an Asteroid Candy Sega arcade cabinet
yeah,
one
yeah,
too. That was
I
pretty
have that
sick.
one, but I haven't built it yet. But building it, it was super easy, and it's really cool once you put it together, and it tilts. So if you like the aesthetic and you like the design of arcade machines, definitely look for that. It's not going to break the bank. It's not that expensive, but it just takes some time to
No.
put together and the little decals and stuff. There's also the aforementioned from Read Only Memory, the pop up book, which I believe we've done a swing and report
Hmm.
show on or mentioned. And that's really cool. I backed that, and I think they're shipping out soon. Speaking of Yu Suzuki, I also backed their Dreamcast book, which he signed, and I haven't received it yet. So I'm getting a little worried because I've seen people in America.
Posting it on
Yeah, and I'm
Twitter.
like, I'll click their name
Yeah.
immediately to see where they are, and it's like Boston, Massachusetts, or something. I'm like, where's mine? I hope it didn't get stolen. Like, I don't know. They didn't send
Yeah.
out tracking numbers, and I feel like it really should with
Oh, that I agree,
Yeah,
because then now they're just gonna put themselves in a situation where people are contacting
yeah,
them for when is it
yeah,
coming, you know?
exactly. So I'm getting a little worried. Like I think that should have the odd like the sign only anyway. Um, so hang on. It's a surprisingly large franchise, so much so that I think after talking with you here for close to an hour about the original, I think there's enough to do an episode in the
Crazy.
future on Hang On sequels. And
Oh yeah.
we're gonna quickly though run through the ones here. I think there's just a lot of development stories, gameplay that we can talk about, a lot of interesting things. When you group all these games together, I think we could have a beefy episode in the future. Plus, we don't want to burn through everything. But Hang On Junior, this one was new to me. This released in 1985. It's a stripped down version of the System E hardware. I've heard it's a little more cartoony. It cuts, there's cuts to music and graphics. So it's a stripped down version, I think, for people who probably had cheaper arcade hardware and wanted to have Hang On but couldn't afford the big riding cabinet. Um, we
Yeah.
mentioned,
But Junior
hmm?
though, like there was also a Neko the Dolphin Junior. Like I feel like if I ever have a kid, I'm just gonna give him the Junior versions of games just to be
That's
safe,
funny. Yeah,
and be like, sorry.
yeah. Junior
Sorry, go
was
on.
kind of a thing with Sega for a while. I wish we'd have a
Yeah,
Yakuza Junior. That would be cool. Like a Dragon
they're
Junior,
all
like a
kids.
Junior. Um,
You play as Kazuma as an 8-year-old.
you don't give them ideas; they'll do that.
Yeah, I
Hang On
know.
2, which we mentioned, it was a direct sequel to the Mark III version, downgraded graphics and arcade music, so that's a plus at least. Super Hang On, which I think is the biggest game out of all of these. It was the true sequel,
Yep.
released in 1987. Worthy of another episode for sure, and I think all these others too can be mentioned in that one. GP Rider, which was released in 1990. It's a pseudo sequel, much like how G Lock is a sequel to Afterburner.
That's
There's
right.
this one which I thought was really cool. So it's called Limited Edition Hang On. It came out in 1991, and we were talking about how it would be cool if M2 brought back the deluxe cabinet. So in this case, uh, what is this? 16 years after the release of Super Hang On? No, not 16. 6 years. I'm sorry. After the
Six
release
years.
of
Yeah.
Super Hang On for arcades, there was a full rideable blue bike. So I thought that was cool that they brought it back. Um, Hang On GP 1995. This was the third game in the series. It featured full 3D graphics and released as a Saturn exclusive. And little fun fact for that, I forgot what his name is, but I believe he did a voice in Shenmue 2 as one of the characters. And I looked up his voice actor history, and it said he was the menu music for Hang On GP. He was actually at a convention I went to, and I got him to sign the Hang On GP. So that's kind of funny.
You know what? I never played Hang On GP. I'm looking at it right now, and it was made. It wasn't even made by in Sega. It's like a
Yeah,
third party
yeah.
company, right? Get Jinkai or
Yeah,
whatever.
so I
Okay.
really feel like it's probably a game that they just looked at it and said, "That looks like Hang On. Let's put it on the Saturn and put Hang On GP on there so we can, move some copies." It's strange though because it is kind of like a mix between that GP Rider I mentioned and
Yeah.
Hang On.
Yeah.
And the guy who signed it too, he signed his name backwards. I don't know why he did that.
Uh,
Like I don't
what?
know why. And
It feels like it's harder to do that. Like to sign it backwards. He's like, I
he
don't
signed
care.
it backwards, and
Maybe he
I
was.
think it either is because he didn't believe that he actually worked on it, even though his name's on it, or because he's just a really weird guy. I don't know. I mean, if you're a dude, I don't know. I'm not gonna say anything, but it was weird. He seemed like a nice guy, but
Okay.
geez, like, what are you doing? Just sign your name. And then finally, we have 3D Super Hang On, released in 2013. This was the M2 produced 3D Classics version of Super Hang On for the Nintendo 3DS. Tons of features on there, including the one that I mentioned where it simulated riding in the cabinet. I don't remember if this uses the accelerometer, but they'd be stupid not to, so I think it probably does. Um,
Mm.
so if you, out of all of the ports that we talked about, which one would you suggest people check out?
I mean, if you can't get a deluxe cabinet, which is like, let's be honest, the way to
Hmm.
play it. Um, I guess 3D Super Hang On the
Hmm.
3DS, but it kind of like hurts my soul a little bit because like this should already be on the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
Like I love the 3DS when it was out, but the screen is so low quality, and like just the idea of being able to play it on your TV is a lot better than just playing it on a small, like 32 by 302 pixels. You know what I mean?
Right. And
Screen.
the Switch has an
Yeah.
accelerometer, so they could do that kind of control. That would be pretty
Yep.
cool. Um, yeah, I would say go with the Shenmue version or the 3D Super Hang-On, just so you can get a taste of both of them. But yeah, they definitely need to give it a Sega Aegis release for the Switch now.
Go
Yeah,
online, buy the arcade
yeah,
deluxe, ship it to your house, set it up, email us so we could go to your house and play it,
yeah.
and then you can enjoy it yourself after we break it with our massive American appetites.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, geez, 60 pounds more than an average Japanese man. Wow.
And that's just the average. That's still not like like the heavy set people, or you know what I mean. Like I'd probably break the bike in Japan. Like I wouldn't even sit on it because right when I lean, it just like leans the whole machine with me. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't risk it. You know what I
Right.
mean? But I don't know. Would you risk it like public embarrassment that you're too heavy for
Yes.
it? I mean, we're talking about Japanese people here, like 130 pounds.
Yeah,
You know what I
right,
mean?
right. No, I'd
So
risk it because
whatever.
I want to ride it. I'm an American. Get me on that. Can I ride it? Get me on it.
And if I fall, I'm suing you
Exactly.
right away. That's the first thing out of my mouth.
Exactly.
Should have been fat proof.
Uh,
Anyway,
so to wrap things up here, do you have any final thoughts on Hang On before we go into our Patreon supporters and their memories of the game?
it's a game where you ride a bike and you ride it fast and you beat a
Yes.
clock. If you like that, you'll like
Yeah.
this. And if you want, and it's a super scalar
Hmm.
game. And why not play it? I mean, what other games do you have to play? There's no games anymore, dude. Just go back and play this game. That's my advice.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
That's
would
it.
say go back, play this one, and then play through all of the Studio 128, AM2, whatever you call them, R&D 8, super scalar games. It's a great kind of history of classic Sega arcade games. And, this might be the earliest one. It might not be the deepest, but there's still a lot there. And, if you're a Shenmue fan, give this one a try again. Break out of your Shenmue world, play some other games.
I was gonna
Hmm.
ask you, like, we know that me and you, we like see the super scalar games, and we kind of, they're legendary for
Right.
Sega fans. But like, do you think they get kind of a raw deal in mainstream like audiences? I know that like there's some like mass media that some of these games got, like Afterburner being Terminator 2 for
Hmm.
whatever. But like, I feel like when people talk about old arcade games, they always talk about like Pac-Man, Space Invaders, or Donkey Kong, or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's like these games they talk about, but nobody really gives like mainstream credit to like these basically are attractions or like rides or like half attraction rides like at Disney
yeah.
in an
I'd
arcade
agree with
game.
you there, but I think we're finally getting to the point where people like us who remember these games fondly are giving them more of a life. Like we're seeing now, there's actual books coming out, there's toys. It's kind of a renaissance for games of the 80s, whereas stuff like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong, great games, but they're kind of passe now. They've had their documentaries, they've had their books, and now we're kind of moving on to people who are in their like late 20s, 30s,
30s,
40s, and
40s.
they're really
Yeah,
remembering
right.
these. And there's some great books out there. I'm looking right now. There's the Hardcore Gaming 101 books. There is the Sega Arcade Revolution books, and then the upcoming pop-up books. So there's a lot of stuff now, a lot more history. And I even think that Studio 128 stuff that we were talking about is relatively new. Like I don't recall seeing that before on the wikis, and it's not something a lot of people have talked about. So I'm really glad that we covered it here. And if you like our show, you can support us on Patreon. We have a Patreon account. That's patreon.com/segabits. If you support us at any level, you will have your comments read aloud at the end of the episode. And you can share memories. You can tell us you hate the game. You can tell us you've never played it. Some people are like, looks great, never played it. But we'll give you a shout out, read what you have to say. So let's dive right in and close the show out with these guys. So we've got Brian Truong, who says, my dad and I played the Sega Master System version a lot together when I was a kid. Fond, nostalgic memories for sure. And we liked that. Daniel Andres, who's become a regular here, he said, I believe that the first time that I ever discovered this game was in Shenmue at the U Arcade. At first, I didn't really like the game or its concept on what you had to do in it. However, over time, the title did definitely grow on me, and I even now own the original Master System version of it. I do come back to it every now and then to hopefully get a little farther than I was at the last time. Also, it's sort of genius that the game is in Shenmue because the controls do teach you what's to come for later on the third disc of the game. Yeah, isn't that interesting? It's like a little...
I didn't think of that, it's like a call, like, you actually
it's kind of like the Slumdog Millionaire moment where Rio's like, I've been trading in this. Let me look back in my earlier life experiences playing Hang On.
Yeah. I never thought of that way, but that's
cool. I like that. And then Nicholas Schaefer, another longtime commenter here on the show, he said, my uncle worked at an arcade called Boomtown. I love that name. Boomtown.
I love it, yeah.
I'm going to Boomtown, play some Hang On.
I like it.
Yo, Ma.
Yeah, I like it.
I'm going to Boomtown. You go ding down, ding on.
Okay, Boomer.
Boomer. Yeah, okay, Boomer Town. Sorry.
Yeah.
My uncle worked in an arcade called Boomtown, and Hang On was always a favorite. The motorcycle just drew me in. It wasn't just buttons or a wheel, but you actually got on, and it felt like you were able to really drive a motorcycle. Wow.
I'm jealous of him, dude. Like, he got to play it. Like, man, oh my god.
Maybe he broke it.
This guy's brave. Maybe, yeah. Yeah, I mean, what do you expect? I mean, we Americans, we're just so goddamn thick.
When we see a game, we want to ride it and break it. Hell, I'll climb onto an old arcade machine like Pac-Man, just sit on the top of it. I'm riding it. Yeah.
Well, I went to the city nearest me, and all the arcade games like were kind of broken, like all the ride-on ones. So like, I get it, dude. Yeah. We're awesome. We're an awesome. Japan can't make. They make junk. It should be American made. Anyway, that's a good way to close up the show.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you again on the next episode of Sega Talk. Let's hang out of here. Can you just lean to the right or left? You doing it? I'm hanging off.
Yes. All right.
Bye.
Bye.